My earliest memory is riding in my grandfather's boat, arm over the side, hand in the spray. I've spent much of the rest of my life chasing this feeling. All of that has led to this. The wooden boat experience. Going to the Finger Lakes Boating Museum last week and hearing from some of you made me really start thinking about how I got here to the wooden boat experience and what boats brought me here. It was a little bit nostalgic, and I was hoping that maybe some of you felt the same way or were thinking about what boats you had when you were a kid or whenever you started boating. Now let's look at the types of boats that I did own or I was in for one reason or another and how it shaped my boating experience and the wooden boat experience. The first real boat I had was one I created. One day my dad brought home 2 Army surplus footbridge pontoons. For a while, we used them like canoes, although they weren't very stable. I decided to make the 2 into one boat. We didn't have a lot of money, but my parents had bought a house on the Seneca River, and that was worth a fortune to me. So I put some steel pipes into the pipes on either end of the pontoons and drove wooden wedges into the ends to hold them. I added C-clamps in the middle as well. Somehow, I ended up with a 16-horse Elgin outboard, probably from my Uncle Brent, which I put on the back. The first test drive was less than successful, as water shot up between the pontoons, trying to wash me over the transom. I fixed that by bolting a 2x6 in between, which blocked the water and got rid of the C-clamps. I was in business. The motor only ran on one cylinder most of the time, so we would try to ski, but would just be dragging along in the water until the second cylinder kicked in, bringing us up on top. When that happened, it was as good of a feeling as I ever felt in any expensive ski boat. Eventually, my uncle's neighbor Don gave me a 28 horsepower Johnson. At that time, I also added remote steering. I was too young to drive, but I was all over the river in that boat. That was if I had any gas. The next boat I had access to was when my dad brought home an MFG V-hulled boat with a 75 horse Johnson. Unfortunately, this motor had a bad starter, so usually I had to start it using the emergency rope handle. And I can tell you, as a young kid, that was not a pleasant experience every time it would kick back. I was injured most of the time trying to start that thing. Then I got a mid-1950s winter boat. I think it was a 56. Again, another fiberglass boat. And I bought a 40-horse Evinrude electric shift. That was a great skiing boat. Of course, I only weighed 130 pounds at the time. We used to throw marshmallows back to the skier from that boat, and my friend Marty Lynch was the only one who ever caught one right in his mouth, and that was on a 75-foot tow rope. Don, who gave me the 28 horsepower, also had a Correct Craft skier, the first inboard I was ever in. I skied behind it too. It was a cool boat with a straight 6, I believe Chrysler engine in it, but it might have been Chevy because I think he was a Chevy guy. My next door neighbor on the river had a number of wooden cruisers, mostly Owens and Trojans, I think. I would notice he was always working on those boats. That should have told me something. I've had a number of other boats. An aluminum Lone Star, 2 Barefoot Warriors. These boats are made just for barefoot water skiing. We still have one of these. I used to have a 1964 32-foot Lures cruiser, mahogany, solid straked boat, with a fly bridge. The wood from that boat became part of my studio. My friend Bill had several Mastercrafts, which got me started in skiing competitively. I love those boats. The stars and stripes were so cool on them. And now I'm in my Lyman, a 26-foot sleeper. It's a 1967, cruising the St. Lawrence. Most of the time not going as fast, but enjoying it just as much. There are a bunch of other boats I spent time in, on this river and other rivers and lakes, but the page is full now, so I can't draw anymore. Now let's see what I accomplished this week and last on the Chris Craft. Don't forget, next week we'll be looking at Pat 2, a restoration of a 1924 tour boat. While I get warmed up stripping paint, why don't you think about the boats you've had? I'd love to hear about them in the comments. Now let's talk a bit about the motor we'll be using in the Chris Craft. I winterized this motor a while ago, and it has been run since I had it. But one of the things we're going to do soon is go through this thing totally with a friend of mine who's a really good mechanic, and he's going to tell me what he would do if he was to purchase an engine and was going to use it without a total rebuild, which I don't think this needs. I can't imagine it does. It doesn't look like it's got that much time on it. It's obviously a repower. So we're going to do that, and we'll film that whole thing to show you guys. I decided to level the boat using the engine stringers, which should be fairly level to the water. All right, let's deal with our carburetor issue. This carburetor right here is the carb that was on it. And as you can see, this looks like a cobbled up mess. It had a pretty cobbed up plate that looks like somebody cut it with a Sawzall. Although it does have a decent spark arrestor, which spark arresters are not that easy to come by and surprisingly expensive. Actually, this carburetor is just a mess. So we want to make the switch to this carb right here. So this is obviously off of a Mercruiser. It's off of the same size engine, an inboard outboard. So I've got my son, who is a machinist, making up a plate for me. So he quickly threw this together just to give me an idea of clearance for the throttle and everything, but he's actually going to make one on the CNC machine. I've got to figure out what I want for a base, make sure this is clear of everything, and also the wedge we have to figure out. Well, we did figure it out. It's 3/4 of an inch higher in the back than the front, but he needs to know which way this carb sits, all that kind of stuff. So right now we are going to do some measurements and make a drawing. Okay, so now that's loose. I think we are going to need a little penetrating oil for that one. That's going to have to wait till another day. But as you can see, a little rusty. We'll get that off. This is all unhooked in here. The goal was to get this pipe out of here. So I'm going to see if I can get that to come apart right now. Sometimes it's the craziest stuff that gives you trouble, and the things you think are going to be trouble are so easy. Brass fittings, people. They don't give you this kind of trouble. And they don't do this. PB blaster on that steering wheel so we can get it off. Wouldn't even budge the other day. And you can actually see where it has penetrated in there part of the way. All right, let's get this dash out of here. Another thing we got to figure out is, and excuse all this wind noise, what are we going to get chromed on this boat? We're going to visit the chromer soon. So what items do we actually want chromed on here? This is something I wasn't going to do, but the Chris Craft doesn't have that many items, and a little bit of bling might not be bad. I think we better address this before we re-chrome it and try to put it back on and make a mess out of it. That's crazy. Huh, it's a little gummed up there for some reason. We'll chase those threads off with a die. So you can see these emblems right here, which actually came off a bigger Sea Skiff. But I'm not sure if I want to put those on or not. I guess it depends on how much it costs to get them chromed. We have the gas gauge, or I'm sorry, we have the gas cap. This is a new old stock Wilcox Crittenden which would make a nice plate. This has never been used. Now I've got this flagpole sitting here in this spot, but actually that's not what goes in this spot. What should be here is the lifting ring. So that's going to get re-chromed. And then the flag will actually go on one side. So we'll get that re-chromed. These have some tape residue and stuff on them, but they're not in bad shape. I'm going to try and clean those up and see if they need to be chromed or not. This is the ring for the exhaust. So we'll get that done. And then up front here, we have the original bow light, which we're going to get done. We have the lifting ring for up here. And there should be guides for the line right here. I have some nice gauges that I think will be okay if I can get them to work with that engine. That engine came with a set of gauges. This set of gauges does not really fit in with the time period I'm trying to make it look like. But what I may do is mount those gauges in with the engine on a little plate so that when you're working on the engine, you don't have to look at the gauges up on the dash. You can just look at the gauges right there. I do have a nice old set of gauges. Oil pressure, mechanical, water temperature, mechanical, amp meter, and a tachometer. So, chrome plater soon, and that ought to be an interesting video because we are going to be able to see the whole process. So I'll let you guys know when that'll be. It'll be sometime in the next few episodes. Well, this certainly is the first time this has happened. I actually had to take my sweatshirt off because it's too warm in here. So somehow these screws in the bow light were replaced with mild steel. I don't know if that was original or not, but they were stuck and weren't coming out, so. We got to get this glass out of this windshield. It's making it too heavy. Which means removing this piece of aluminum here. Well, that's way better to get that glass out of there. The wind's died down too. And now I'm not putting as much stress on this windshield because it was kind of stressing out the center joint here, having all this weight on one side and no weight of the glass on the other side. And it was really pulling on it. And now it's really, really lightweight and it won't be hurt just sitting here. And we'll get finished stripping that off soon, although I do love the gray paint. Spent about 3 hours cleaning the bilge between the stringers from the dash area to the transom. But what a great way to understand just what condition the boat is in, the hull, the ribs, and the strakes, and the keel. Unfortunately, the planer is in my way to use this to cut. And I don't want to move it because it's heavy. Figured I'd just cut it by hand. I think you saw me remove this covering board. This section of it was just too damaged to be used, especially because it's going to be varnished. Sorry I wasn't able to include the updates on Tom Neely's boat and Rob Roy, but we'll include those in next week's episode 24.